Yeah, cheers, Alice. Thanks for the intro. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So, yeah, as Alice mentioned, we'll be talking around how we can potentially help you guys achieve product market fit. Um, cool. So, just as a bit of an intro about me, so I'm Tom Parker. I'm a product innovation lead, and I sit in the innovation arm of BT called Etc. So I've been a product manager for about 7 years. Primarily focusing on advertising tech. So I started my career running Google search ads for various customers from B2B library supplies and the Royal Society of Chemistry charity, all the way to like Zoopla and Make Furnitureland. So some big companies as well. But quickly kind of wanted to automate away a few of the kind of tasks that are involved in running advertising campaigns, and then shifted towards ad tech ever since. So I've done quite a lot of roles over the last 7 years. So I've done things like build departments within big organizations. I've done strategic work and everything through to execution. So yeah, quite a lot of quite broad experience. At the moment, I'm within BT, and I'm currently building out a new team, looking at how we can utilize the mobile network data within the advertising industry. Yeah, in spare time, yeah, I go to a lot of live music. I like my food, so if anyone lives in London and wants any London restaurant recommendations, hit me up. And yeah, obviously mentoring small businesses as well. Cool. So yeah, there's kind of five things that I wanted that would be good to run you guys through today. So firstly, discuss kind of what is product market fit. Secondly, kind of go into why it's important to really understand your users or customers. Thirdly, some tips for conducting customer research. Fourth one around market research to complement that. And finally, how we can bring this all together and everything else you know about your business onto something called a lean business canvas. Cool. So firstly, product market fit. So what is product market fit? So it's essentially when your product or service deeply resonates with a sizable group of customers is a definition I found. And basically, this is really important as it validates that there's a real need for your product or service, and also that not just there's a need for the problem to be solved, but that you're solving that customer's problems in the right way. This is essential for kind of long-term success and survival of kind of businesses. A rule of thumb and how you can figure out if you have achieved product market fit is if you kind of asked your customers, how would they feel if they could no longer use your product? If 40% say that they'll be very disappointed or to no longer have your product, that's like a strong indicator. So yeah, cool. So yeah, how can you achieve product market fit? So a few kind of tips from me. The first one would be around always validating your learnings. So we'll come on to this a lot further, but essentially by making sure that all your kind of hypotheses are true, this helps minimize waste, make sure you kind of keep taking your business or kind of strategy in the right direction, and keeps focus on the right things as well. This also enables, by kind of always validating your learnings, this enables you to change and adapt your strategy or anything like that with confidence, and to enable this kind of iterative business development. So one thing we always say is like if you've kind of got investors and you're kind of going into those sort of meetings, a tip that we always talk about is going in and saying what you know and how you know it. So if you can back up anything that you say with how you know it with data, then that really increases confidence in the direction, even if things aren't at the level where you want it to be at the moment. The chief digital officer at BT always says that if you go into a meeting with her with an opinion and she's got a different opinion, her gut and her opinion will trump yours. But if you go with data and say this is why I know it, then you'll always win. So yeah, that's coming from the top, which is great. And then the third one is to be completely customer obsessed. So to really care and understand your customers is so important to ensure that you continue to meet their needs. One thing with product market fit that I've put at the bottom here as well is that you can easily meet, well, not easily, you can meet needs once, but this doesn't mean that those needs will continue to be met in the future. So you need to constantly review if you are continuing to meet the needs of your customers as kind of the world, the industries, everything evolves. I suppose like think of an example of like the cordless phone, like landline phones, they were meeting the needs great back in the day. But now, like I mean, I've never had a landline. I don't like a lot of people don't anymore. So yeah, it needs to be in that constant state of review. On the right hand side here, this is kind of a software example, so you can kind of ignore the smaller words, but kind of the premise is that, and the main takeaway is that this build, measure, learn loop will really help set you up for success and to kind of get towards product market fit. So whenever you do something, measure the impact and learn from it, and then do the next thing. Cool. So on to understanding users. So we talked about being customer success, put customer obsessed, sorry, in the last slide. And I just wanted to give a couple of examples on why it's really important to understand your kind of users or customers. So I'm not sure if anyone's seen this example before, but this is from Samsung. So essentially Samsung built this phone that was aimed at a kind of older target market, so older people. And they sold quite a lot of the phones. However, they noticed like through their data that they collected things that people weren't actually using them. So what they did is they went out there, got out the building and went and spoke to and spent some time with their customers, the people that have actually bought these phones. So what they did is they'd give them the phone, it'd be like take it from the shelf, here we go, and figure out like how they would interact with it. So what was actually happening was if I kind of bought a new phone, the first thing I would do is turn it on, and then I kind of go through the setup. What the people that were buying this Samsung phone were doing is they were getting the phone out of the box, getting the manual out of the box, then reading the manual from end to end, and then getting to the phone. And if anyone's seen a phone manual recently, there's a lot in there. And by the time that they were getting to the phone, to actually turning on the phone, they were so confused by everything in the manual, didn't know where to start, and just kind of left it. So actually, from speaking to customers, they then realized that they hadn't launched the product with everything they needed. So what they did is they built what we have in these photos here. They embedded the phone within the manual. So as people go through the manual, they'd be going through the steps on the phone. So yeah, this really helped understand their customers' needs. I think this is on their personas, right, of who actually bought the product. So a lot of kind of product management is around the surface design. So like, how does a user engage with the whole ecosystem around your product? So how do they find it? How do they onboard or start using the product? What do they do when they're then a regular user of your product? And also importantly, like how do they offboard as well? So you want to have a good experience there. Um, I really like this example. I think it's a really good one of conducting your research in the right place where customers actually use the product or service as well. And yeah, this is really great as customers are really bad at understanding their own needs. So another example from someone I met a few years ago is they were brought in as a consultant into HSBC. It's probably like 5 years ago, if not a little bit longer now. And they were tasked with creating a report card lost or stolen kind of online flow because they had loads of people ringing up to kind of report their card as lost or stolen, and it was a really manual flow through their kind of support teams and all that sort of stuff. So this guy went in and with this task and he was like, cool, I want to go and spend some time in the customer support, just a couple of days. And whoever had hired him said, no, we know this is your remit. This is what we want you to do. And he said, just humor me. Let me go and find out. So what he did is he spent a couple of days in customer support teams, listening in on calls. And what he found is a lot of the time, people were ringing up in the morning saying, hey, I've lost my card. Can you cancel it and send me a new one? About like 8 o'clock in the morning. Those same people, a lot of the time, were then ringing back up at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening as they'd got home and their card was on the kitchen table. So actually, what we figured out was that if instead they could just block cards and put a temporary block, this would solve the statistic was 80% of problems, which also prevented 80% new cards being sent out and all that kind of upstream tasks. So they actually managed to deliver this temporary block in about a third of the time. They still built out the whole flow for if you kind of need a new card, but this temporary block would solve 80% of cases with a lot less work. Cool. And I think an example, I actually can't remember if this is a fake quote, but there's a famous one from Henry Ford being like, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses and not a car. So yeah, always kind of figure out what the actual problems are, as opposed to just kind of um, do kind of work on the solution that you're told. Cool. On to the third one. So user research. So yeah, how actually do you approach understanding your customers or your users? So what I wanted to talk to you about, which I kind of alluded to earlier, was assumptions. So within BT, we've had a team called RapidWorks. And the aim of RapidWorks is to unearth unicorns, so build kind of new products and services for BT and use rapid experimentation to kind of get there. The team kind of uses like our version of Eric Ries lean startup methodologies, of which kind of assumptions are a really, really key part. So essentially the premise is in your kind of business, and there's a lot that we think we know, but we might not really know it. It might be an opinion, a hunch. It might come from an expert in the field, but you might not have data to back it up. So yeah, we refer to these as assumptions. So statements of our current belief, essentially stuff that you couldn't say, back to the point from earlier around like, what do you know? How do you know it? If you couldn't back up the how you know it, then it's probably an assumption. So if you kind of act on these unverified assumptions, you're adding a lot of risk to your kind of direction of travel, your strategy in your business. Whereas if you work on validated stuff, you're more likely to be going in the right direction. So yeah, I know you can minimize waste and things like that. So what we kind of do is we use this technique of mapping assumptions, so building an assumption map. So there's a load of different types of things you can do this for your business. So it could be around customers' problems. If you're starting out, like what is the problem I'm trying to solve, and figure out loads of different assumptions around that. Like, I think this is the most important, etc., etc. It could be like the willingness to pay. Like, are people willing to pay to solve that problem, or how much they're willing to pay, or how they want to structure it. Like, if you think of a lot of things are subscription based now versus one-off payments versus etc., etc. And also what sort of value can be created by solving that problem. It can even be things like, what is the most important message if you're thinking about how you market it and how you speak to your customers about your kind of business and your products. So a little while ago, on Digital Boost, I mentored a small business that are selling a product which is a quinoa porridge, as opposed to kind of the traditional kind of oats porridge. And they were saying, we just don't know how to. I was like, what's the USPs? What's the most important? And they listed a few different things, like it's higher in protein, it's got less fiber in it, it's seeds instead of grain. And I was like, that's great, but like, which of those things actually resonate with customers? What is the most important? What will make them go and buy your product? And so they could put all these different things, like, I think this is the most important, and they'll figure out by kind of going through the exercise that I'll talk you through which way they should go for. So basically, come up with all these assumptions. We like to do it in a team. So even if people you're not working with, if you can do it with friends, you can do it with other small business owners. It's just trying to get as many different things that you think you might be assuming or you believe to be true out your mind, and then you can map them onto this. So on the x-axis, we said we have how confident you are that assumption is true. So anything until you've got evidence will be on the left. And then as you get more evidence, it would move further right. And then on the y-axis, we have how important it is for that to be true. So like, for example, for a lot of products, someone's willingness to pay, if people aren't willing to pay to solve that problem, then that business might not work. So basically you can map these things here. And essentially that top left box, we call leap of faith assumptions or loafers. Because if any of those aren't true, you'd be making a leap of faith with your business or your strategy. So yeah, and so they're really important to validate. Cool. So yeah, when you do this kind of research, when you kind of go onto it, this really helps you understand like what you actually need to find out, what's the most important outcomes from your research. And essentially what it needs to be validating or invalidating all the things in the top left-hand quadrant here. Cool. So you know what you need to validate. How do you do it? So there's two main types of user research. So the first one is qualitative, and the second one is quantitative. So qualitative stuff is generally talking to people. So things like interviews, focus groups, diary studies, where you can ask people like, what have they done with if it's something that they might use every day, like what have they done with it that day? And usability testing. So I've worked predominantly in like software, but it's anything to do with your kind of customer's experience with the product. Like there is an example, like with the example earlier, on with Samsung, they could have tried two different types of like the manual versus the phone being in the box, and by testing that, they can figure out what might work best. And then from a quantitative point of view, basically metrics, stats, numbers based stuff. So you can do surveys, which might not all have numbers questions, but they can help you understand like the percentage of people with a certain opinion. If you've kind of got a website, you can do things like A/B testing, or it doesn't have to be a website, you can just have two versions of things. Products and website metrics. So like say you launched a new page on your site or a new feature on your software, you can figure out if that's being used and is it being used as much as you want. And customer support as well. So say you did something around trying to say you launched a help center or FAQs, has it actually reduced the number of support queries that you get through? So yeah, what you want to test from the assumption map. Now you can decide how to test it, and then continue on similar mold, we then suggest building an experiment. So this is essentially what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And includes kind of benchmarks, which will help you kind of validate or invalidate the assumptions. So at the top, we say like, what are the loafers are you testing? So what are you trying to validate or invalidate? And what's the most important thing to learn? When you kind of do interviews, especially, you can learn a lot from them, but you need to make sure that you actually learn the most important thing. And by having this design before you then do customer interviews, it keeps focus for your outcomes of that conversation. So things like your method, say it's an interview, great. Hypothesis could be, I think that if I ask seven people, we always say seven's quite a good number for interviews. If they what their biggest problem is in this market, if five say this, five say X, then I know I'm going in the right direction, something like that. Yeah, recruitment, how will you recruit people? So this really varies because things like surveys, you can just kind of put surveys online and you can put like a filter for the type of people. You can put kind of questions before. It could be things like, for me, I do a lot of B2B stuff, so I might message people on LinkedIn, or I might know people in the industries I work in. And yeah, I think the other kind of key ones are kind of the validation threshold, like make sure to have a number that you need to hit, because it's really easy to say like, oh, what's if in the example I gave before, I said 5, if 4 people said it, you've still, your experiment is still invalidated. So try and think about that. And then additional metrics, still good to find out other things as well, but make sure your focus is still on the most important things. Cool. So a few tips around user research. So when you're kind of doing new things, new businesses, new products, new services, it tends to be a lot of verbal stuff. So yeah, but the aim is just to kind of really come out with a full understanding of your kind of customer segment or your users. So what they're trying to achieve, even the demographics helps. I think that someone put that as a question ahead of the session, like, how do I know what demographics to go after? Ask lots of people and see which demographic that you're that have the problem. So you can ask really broad, and that can help narrow it down. In terms of your questioning for kind of this verbal communication, it's really important to be quite open-ended. Leading questions aren't great because then you kind of get biased results. So yeah, and the other one is around being instance related. So an example I often use is if you ask someone how often they go to the gym, they might say, I go to the gym 3 times a week. But if you ask someone, how many times last week did you go to the gym? They might say, oh, well, I only went once because I was busy that day then. I was busy work and then I wasn't feeling well and stuff. So actually, yeah, they only went once. So people always want to kind of please in interviews. So actually using instance related stuff often gets you closer to the actual truth. Another one on the right hand side we have here is around like where you kind of conduct this research. So the best places to conduct research is in the place the user's experiencing a problem. I think some people that I know that build kind of internal software, so say for their company, will just go and sit next to for a day, sit next to people that are actually the users of their software and see how they're using it, and then see what problems they're actually experiencing in that point in time. And then again, when you're speaking to people, this bit's really hard. But it's really important to not defend your product or service, especially if it's something that you've created, like if it's your business, you'll naturally, and you should be proud of it, but you really want to, if you kind of start defending, you might get kind of biased results. So yeah, it's really important to just listen to your kind of customers or prospects. Cool. And then, yeah, in terms of the types of research and things you can get, we talk around strength of evidence. So what people say, like, is obviously a lot less than kind of what people do. So if you get people, if people say, "Oh yeah, I'd definitely buy that," but then you say, "Hey, here it is, will you buy it?" and then they don't, then you might have had really, really strong research, but you want to basically through all your different experiments, and you want to push people up this curve. So even things like signing up for a waiting list versus a conversation is like a much higher indicator that they are interested because they're happy for your email spam after, things like that. Coming to a meeting and actually spending time. That I always think like time is the most precious thing we have. So if people are willing to spend time with you on something, then that indicates far more that without incentive, and that they're far more that they're interested in it. Cool. So yeah. Yeah, I want to make a note as well for those of you in the B2B world around customers versus users. So they're not always the same thing. And in this scenario, you need to make sure you collect research from both. So on average in the B2B world, there's 6.8 people are involved in a buying committee. So it might go up to like a CFO in kind of medium to large businesses. And you actually need to get all those people on board, where even if it's like an exec using your software. In technology, apparently this can be between 12 and 14 people. So yeah, you might get someone really excited, but if they don't ultimately hold budget, then you really need to think about this. So when you build out kind of user personas, if your users and customers might be different things, it's really important to include both. Cool. So what you've done, say we've gone through, we've done our experiment, we've got all our results, all our notes. How do we actually make sense of all of this? So one tip that I like to use is called affinity mapping. So what you do is essentially the different colors here are like different interviews, different people. You can do this with sticky notes, like in real life, or there's lots of like tools online that you can use as well. And basically, if you put on each individual sticky note like a data point, so something you've observed, something they've said, or a behavior. And basically, what you can do is when you've got all that color code in different ones, then just group together the same sort of things. So if then this helps you answer the question like if multiple people have said the same thing. When you're doing your grouping, like a good tip as well that I find is like asking around like what is the core driver behind the point, like what's the sentiment. So then you might have loads of different quotes, but actually if they're all alluding to the same things, then they can be grouped together as well. So yeah, basically this synthesization or whatever word that is, exercise is really important because yeah, this if you think around our build, measure, learn, your measure kind of piece is conducting the experiments or in the interviews in this scenario. But to be able to learn, you need to complete this exercise to kind of close that loop. So yeah, goes back to the kind of what do you know, how do you know it? You need this bit to be able to do the how do you know it bit. So yeah. In the quinoa example, you might find out 8 out of 10 people have said that it's the fact that it's higher protein, which is most likely to make me buy this product instead of the fact that it was what was it? Like not oats, nuts, not oats. Um, Sweet. So yeah, to complement this, market research. So yeah, you've spoken to users, you might know there's a problem, but you now need to have a little look into the market. So yeah, talked about customer research, and we'll come on to competitor research. But the one we'll talk about first is your market dynamics and sizing. So market dynamics is something to kind of be more aware of. It will probably need like less deep research, but you kind of just need to understand the industry that you're looking to operate in or you are operating in already, and whether kind of changes in dynamics need to be permanently catered for. in like the DNA of your product essentially, or whether they're just a temporary change. So an example from kind of COVID is like people weren't flying. So therefore the airline industries weren't doing very well, but they kind of knew that that would be a temporary thing and people would go back to flight. Versus with COVID, a lot of us, like I am today, like working from home. So if you are selling office chairs and you only deliver to offices, you need to account for the fact that not everyone's working. A lot of people aren't working in offices at all or as much. So they might want to pivot or add an extra kind of service where they'll actually deliver to people's homes. Cool. So in terms of market sizing, this is a quite good exercise to actually understand how big your kind of business could be. So, and the key thing here, it helps you, understand the scale of your opportunity and understand like what there is to go after. And the way we kind of talk about this is three things. So it's TAM, SAM, and SOM. So I think I've got an example which hopefully will help with the understanding here around kind of if you're a fisherman or fisherwoman. So your TAM is your total addressable market. So you can think of that as if you're fishing, you could fish in theory all the fish in the ocean. So that's how many things are there? How much could you potentially capture? Your SAM, so your serviceable addressable market, is what could you actually reach? Like what is potential? So in this example, it'd be like all the fish in the bay where our boat lives or where it can get to. An example in your businesses could be maybe in your industry, there's X many people in the world, which could be your TAM, but you only operate in the UK at the moment. So your SAM is the UK proportion of that. And then within then you have your SOM, which is your serviceable obtainable market. So in the fish example, you've got all the fish in the ocean, then you've got the fish in the bay, and then your SOM, so obtainable, what can you do with the resources available to you? So this would be all the fish that you're able to catch with the amount of bait you currently have. So yeah, what can you actually get with the resources available to you? So understanding this really helps you understand your kind of scope. But it'll help with everything from kind of like things like resource and stock planning. If it's a service, you might be able to figure out if you hire an extra person, then your SOM would increase. Like if there's only a couple of you, could double, for example. If you expand to a new market, your SOM could increase, things like that. So yeah, this can be very loose initially, but I do still think it's worth doing. And basically through kind of understanding your market and your personas and your customers better and better, this will become more and more accurate. The AI tools will probably help you with this you could probably get within about 10 minutes, like a starting point on this now. There's one called perplexity.ai, which is really good for this sort of stuff. And they cite everything they use. So yeah, might be worth a little go. Cool. Onto competitor research. So there's a few reasons why it's really good and important to do competitor research. So there's different types of features and things that you will have in your kind of product or service. And one thing from competitor research is to understanding what are the standard features and best practices that you basically need and people expect in your industry. Like if you think on your phone, people now kind of come to expect like fingerprint, even Face ID, things like that. So you kind of know that you need that sort of stuff. Like if you didn't have like a security pin, for example, no one's going to buy your product. So you need to kind of start with that. The second one around understanding how competitors approach common problems. So yeah, just actually understanding what's your approach and what do others do. You might be the same, might be different. Pens, there's some pens have lids, some are clicky, things like that. The third one here, or kind of and that helps you, sorry, understand opportunities to differentiate and innovate from that and the other things as well. Fourth one on this is around understanding and discovering kind of the unmet needs. So like one example for my world is in the billboard advertising, they get data updated every 3 months. So is it an unmet need that that they're not getting it more regularly. So is that something that I could build into my kind of offering to help my data differentiate from others? Um, and then the last one here is, which we'll kind of talk on about further, is like avoiding reinventing the wheel. So you kind of do want to differentiate, but there are some things where you kind of do want to converge as well. Cool. So there's three types of competitors that I wanted to note as well, because a lot of the time people don't necessarily consider all the different ones. So I quite like this example because it's a bit silly. But say you're spinach, a direct competitor for you to eat your greens might be kale. So solves the problem the same way. You can put it in a pan with all your sort of stuff. So it's a similar solution essentially. If you're wanting to eat your greens though, you could instead have celery. You dip it in some hummus or whatever. But it's very different approach to kind of getting that goodness. And then a completely alternative type of competitor, solving the problem a different way could be this naked pale blazer. Yeah. So yeah, really helps you think outside the box. With the quinoa example, you might have if you think a direct competitor would be the oats, because if you're trying to have like something for breakfast, but there's lots of other things you can have for breakfast. You could have bacon sandwiches, you could have an egg benedict, you could have a pain au chocolat, you could have a smoothie, you could have a protein shake. Lots of things people do. So yeah, really actually understanding who you're competing against for that money or in that market is really important. So yeah, but how can you actually make sense of this? Because having all this info and doing this sort of research, it can be hard. So one easily digestible thing that you can create is a comparison of your competitor analysis is a comparison matrix. So again, similar to the affinity mapping that we spoke about earlier, this will help you kind of synthesize the kind of data that you have. So if you basically put your product, your different competitors that you want to outline, and then along on the rows, different criteria. So yeah, basically comparing the job that you're planning to do. So it could be things like how quickly is something to make, like what's your pricing. So if you're talking about the breakfast example, like what utensils do you require? Like with porridge, you need a spoon, whereas with a pain au chocolat, you just need your hands. How healthy is something? Like basically all that sort of stuff. And you can start to fill out all your info. When you've filled it out for your competitors, what I then do is I go along each line and do kind of some traffic light color coding. So this will help you understand areas that you should focus on. So where are you different? But also if loads of people are the same on certain things, then maybe that's the sort of feature which is an expected one that you need. So like the passcode example on the mobile. So yeah. One other thing here, which I quite like including, is switching costs. So if you go to the shop, if you go to Tesco versus Sainsbury's, the switching cost isn't massive in my mind anyway, as long as you have a Nectar card and Club card, because otherwise they rent you now. But if you were with music streaming from Spotify to Apple Music and potentially losing all your playlist, that's a massive switching cost. So they've really locked down people. So yeah, because if you're trying to take that market from someone else, it's really important to understand like how are you actually going to persuade people to, or is that going to be a massive uphill battle as well? Cool. So yeah, I think we talked about it briefly earlier around like not just kind of copying competitors. And obviously this is a bit silly example, but basically the premise is that parity is not a strategy, because if you try to replicate what someone else has, by the time you get to their functionality or their product, they'll be doing the next thing, or they should be otherwise they're probably not constantly in that state of understanding their product market fit. So yeah, you can't just be a follower. Fast followers are a thing. But like kind of for long-term success, you do need to differentiate and outline and kind of continually prove to your customers why you're better than the competition. Cool. So we've gone through quite a lot of info. So yeah, we've got your product, your business or your service or whatever it is. You have done your kind of user research, so you know who you're selling to, you've done your market research, you know your kind of USPs, all that sort of stuff. And another tool that I find very useful in helping you kind of bring this all together into one place on one page is called a lean business canvas. So essentially, it's a one pager on your business model. Similarly to when we talk about the Tam Samsums, it doesn't have to be perfect from the start because it's a living, breathing document where it can just have the information you know immediately. And as you learn more, you can update it, or you can even put like how confident you are in some of your statements you put on there. But essentially, what this will do after you create it is it boils down exactly like who you are, like why you're operating, who you're targeting, and how you're doing it, and what's your costs as well and your revenue, to make it a success. So yeah, um, I think this really helps in terms of understanding your product market fit as well and your journey towards it, as it's very problem focused. So yeah, it's got a problem section on here. It You outline on here your unfair advantage. So like why you. So yeah, and this should help keep you kind of true. And everything you should do should really be focused on this. And if you're not kind of driving the direction that's outlined here, then either you've kind of pivoted what you're doing as your business strategy, in which case this needs updating, or you're doing stuff outside what you should be. And as kind of when you're kind of working in a small business, like and talked about time before, like there's always so many things you can do. Like I think when I do a lot of my mentoring sessions, this is something we talk about a lot is focus, just try and do one thing and complete it, then do the next thing. And if you this can make you potentially make you realize that some of the work you're doing actually doesn't align with your strategy and your vision for your company. So yeah, that can be a big benefit of doing this exercise as well. So yeah, it also helps you understand like who are the customers you're speaking to? Are there some people that you are speaking to that you don't need to? Are there certain marketing channels that you need to set up? Is there actually a gap in that kind of part of your kind of customer journey? Um, are you happy with all your kind of revenue streams and your models? Do you think that works for your market? But when you've got everything on one page, it's quite easy to see where to go. This is a bit of an old example and I found from Uber, but so yeah, if you think when they were coming into the UK, like what are some of the problems they were solving, like finding a cab, like black cabs being really expensive in like London, things like that, not knowing the driver and if it's safe, not having cash, although most cabs obviously take cards now. Yeah, they have their competitors, so who are their existing alternatives? What's their solution? Like what are the key metrics? So Uber's like the main thing that Uber track is how long is it from someone booking to them being picked up. They don't that is their like their core metric for the entire business. And they say like if they make that good, then everything else will follow, which I think is quite nice. Um, yeah, things like their unfair advantage. They were like, got 40,000 drivers that are keen for this already. So that's loads. And also we've got the younger demo, like adults are already into this. So yeah. Um, so yeah, early adopters, American tourists, because they came out in the US first. You can always think about that sort of stuff. So yeah, cool. So yeah, it's kind of to wrap up, how do you achieve product market fit? Because it kind of boils down to what we kind of kicked off with around the build, measure, learn. So do something, measure the success, figure out what to do next, do it, and then kind of keep going with that. Yeah.